Hi, and welcome to Tuesdays with Grace. I'm Sabrina, and today we're going to be talking about satin on the Little Rebel. So, a few weeks ago, we talked about different binding techniques. And this is a quilt that we showed here with this fun satin binding for a baby blanket. So today we are going to make one. But first we're going to talk about the types of satin you can use. You can use regular satin, or if you can find it, flannel back satin is going to be your best friend. This is not flannel back satin, and as you can see, there's all sorts of extra hair on the end of this binding piece. So my mom actually had to serge it in order to use this as the satin binding because you just end up with so much extra fluff. This, however, is flannel back satin, and there is no extra stuff going on here. You don't end up with any of the fringe or the fluff or anything like that. So today we are going to be using some flannel back satin. But the first thing that you need to do is cut your fabric. So today I am using cuddle fabric because it's for my nephew. And we're gonna go ahead and cut off the selvage edge because this has about an inch of selvage, as you can see. So what I like to do is just fold it in half a couple of times and trim it right off the edge. The good part about this project is you don't have to be exact with it. So we'll grab our True Cut ruler and our rotary cutter, line it up, and we'll just cut this right off. Make sure it's in the track, and we'll toss that. So that gets rid of your selvage on that edge, and this side is small enough that it's gonna hide when we turn it out, so I'm not gonna worry about this side. The next thing we're gonna do is grab some satin. So I have here a few yards of flannel back satin that I've had for a while, and what we're gonna do is just cut it. You don't have to worry about cutting on the bias or anything like that. We just like to make it simple. And the fun part is you can choose how thick you want this binding. So if you want extra fringe, you can have it one way. If you want it to be smaller, you can have it another. Doesn't really matter. But I like the width of this purple binding, so I'm just gonna measure it here. Looks like I had it at 2.5, so I did a 5-inch binding. So we'll go ahead and cut off our raw edge here because that is looking pretty gross. So now we can use our numbers here, and we wanna go 5 inches. So we'll cut a few pieces of this. And the nice part is these rotary cutters are ambidextrous. So I can cut with both sides of the ruler, and it makes it so much better. We'll keep going here. And it's always good to have more than not enough. So we're just gonna cut a few more pieces here because I like to scrunch it up a little bit. So you end up with ruffles in your binding. I always do at least 2 extra panels than I need for going around the edge. And now we have all of our satin pieces. So what we're gonna do is sew them together just like we would any other binding. So right sides together at an angle, line them up like so, and then we'll sew right across this edge. So we'll bring our binding over here, and like I said, we'll go at an angle here, right sides together, line up your selvages, and then we can sew. And the nice part is we have our center line on the Little Rebel, so you can see here where your center line is going to be all the way up. So make sure your needle's in the middle and go ahead and sew. Perfect. And then we're just going to flip our binding piece over here at the angle and grab another one and continue to sew. So now what we're gonna do is go over to our cutting station and we are just going to cut off the extra pieces here. Just like you would with any other binding, we're just gonna trim off that 1/4 inch. And it doesn't matter if you're off a little bit because it's all just gonna roll up. It's not like regular binding where you see both sides of it. It's a very forgiving project. And these extra scrap pieces here, you can use in a scrap pillow, you can put them in your scrap bin, you can use them for other projects. They're large enough that they still have lots of versatility. So use them however you see fit, or you can throw them away if that's what you like to do. All right, so we'll go ahead and put these in our scrap drawer here. And we're gonna grab our iron and ironing board. It's important that we make sure to press our seams open so that we don't have any extra bulk. We're just gonna start from one side. And it doesn't matter if your fabric is wrinkly because you're gonna fold it in half anyway. So any extra wrinkles will be pressed out in the end. And it's kind of fun. This project can be sized up or down. If you want to make a big one for an adult, you can do that. Or if you want to make an extra small one for a baby or a burp cloth, anything like that, just something fun for anybody to use. I just love the feeling of satin. It's so much fun and babies love it. And pressing it open might be a little bit harder than pressing it to the side, but I promise you it'll be worth it for your end product. Okay, so now that we have our seams pressed open, we're gonna go ahead and fold our binding in half. And it doesn't really matter if it's off a little bit because it's gonna be inside of the blanket anyway, so no one's gonna see it. So we'll just go ahead and press this flat. I'm gonna turn down my temperature just a hair so we don't burn the satin. And this is our last little section. There we go. So now we have all of our satin binding. So the next step is going to be to sew it to one piece of your blanket. So what we're gonna do is talk a little bit about the technique. So as we come here, we gotta find our edge. And you want to make sure that your folded edge is on the inside here. So you wanna have raw edges together. We're just going to take and clip some along this edge. And every so often, what you're gonna do is take your hand, fold it over, and back under. And you end up with a cute little ruffle. And we'll come to this corner here. And in the corners, this is the kind of tricky part. I like to fold it up and down and back under here. So this piece, we'll just give it a little bit of slack and you end up with a little fold that cuts off in the corner. So these two pieces should meet on this side and this side. They meet in the middle here. And then we'll pin on both sides and that will give us almost a mitered corner look. So let's go a couple more inches here. And I think we need a ruffle. So we'll clip that edge there, move it along, and we'll add a ruffle here. And you can vary the size of your ruffles. You can have them larger or smaller, or you can make a pattern with them. There's so much you can do, but it'll end up cute anyway. So we'll keep pinning here. And we'll add another ruffle. I usually use finger widths as the size of my ruffle, so that way you can kind of gauge and keep a little bit of consistency there. Okay, so I have come close to the end of my project. So what I'm gonna do is give myself some extra slack, and I am going to go ahead and trim this down. So we'll cut off our edge here. And what we're gonna do is sew these right sides together just like our regular binding, and make sure we don't get any twists in it. So we'll open this up. Since it's coming down here. And then we'll open our other side up. So just make sure to lay it out first. And when we pull this back and fold it over, is it going to have a twist? Yes. So that means it needs to go the other direction. So when we fold this back, fold it in half, now it's going to lay flat. So we'll open this guy back up and find your corner and your center inch here. Sew down the middle like we did last time. Give yourself a little slack between thread guide 7 and 8 and trim. Now we can take this over here. We're gonna triple check before we do it here that our fold is going the right direction, and Sabrina messed up. So we're just gonna fold this back, pin it into place, give ourselves a little bit of extra ruffle with whatever we have left. And we're just gonna tuck and fold that. So now our quilt is ready to take to the machine. So what you're gonna do is sew a 1/4 inch all the way around. And it doesn't matter if you miss your corners a little bit, they'll work out when we put our backing piece on. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. We'll sew, and then I'll show you what the project is gonna be like afterwards. Okay. So now that you've sewn on your binding to your front piece, what we're gonna do is pin the backing. So I have here one that's ready to take to the sewing machine, and all you're gonna do is make sure that your edges line up. So you wanna make sure that your front piece and your back piece are the same size. And if they aren't, or you have any sort of edge that's mismatched, all you have to do is fold it over like so, and it'll be perfect. So let's take this over to the sewing machine and we will get ready. I'm gonna start in the middle of my edge because I'm gonna need to make a hole about 4 to 6 inches so that you have room to turn your quilt all the way outside. So we're gonna start here on this edge. We're gonna lift our needle up and slide our fabric underneath. And for this edge, I like to sew at 5/8 of an inch. So you give yourself that extra wiggle room. We're gonna push this down, sew a little bit, and back stitch. And I can clearly see my 5/8 of an inch on my metal piece here. So we're gonna go ahead and sew this over here. And we just wanna make sure we're keeping it lined up on that 5/8 of an inch. And And my favorite part is that we get to use the Little Rebel for this because not only is it great for piecing and quilting, it's great for binding too, especially when you have a thick quilt sandwich like this. This is going through so many tough layers of stretchy fabric, and it is handling it so well. So we'll keep going here. We'll keep it at 5/8. I made one of these for my niece back in 2020, and she still has it. And that thing, it washes well, it holds up well, and I didn't even have to use a zigzag stitch. And so with our corners here, one thing I wanted to bring up is when you use the right technique, where we talked about having that folded edge down, this piece here that would normally be sewn up hides perfectly in the corner, and your needle will miss it just perfectly. So we're gonna go right around to this corner. And I'm gonna go off the edge so I can show you. So we're gonna give that a little bit of slack there. So I'm gonna lift this up here. Our sewing machine missed it by just a little bit, but it tucks in that corner, it holds it nice and tight, so you end up with this perfect little edge and this nice ruffle when it pulls out. So we'll keep going here with our 5/8 of an inch, and we'll start fresh on this edge here. Make sure everything is lined up. Okay, so with this, we're coming to the edge. I am going to use my clip to mark where I want to stop. So we're gonna give it about that much room and a little extra so that we have room to backstitch. We'll keep going here. Okay, I've come to that edge. Now I just need to backstitch and stitch over it. I want to really secure this seam because it's going to have everything going through it. So what I'm going to do is lift up my presser foot, give myself a little of slack between 7 and 8, and we're going to come back over here. And now we have our finished piece. So what we're going to do is find that edge that we left open, and we're going to grab each corner and pull it out. So we'll grab this corner out here, and you can grab the binding that we put inside and just pull that out. We'll reach into this corner over here, and pull that out too. And this last one will go naturally. So now you just need to push out your corners, and you can use a stiletto or you can just use your finger because it doesn't really matter. And we'll pull this out here. And we'll give this little corner a tug. We'll go to this side here. That, and we've got all 4 corners. So now our blanket is ready to sew closed. And there's a lot of different ways you can use to sew your quilt closed. Sometimes I will just machine stitch right in there, and you won't even notice because the minky hides it. Another way you can do is hand stitching. If you use a whip stitch to sew that closed, it would be perfect. Or if you have decorative stitches on your machine, you can sew it closed with love from Aunt Sabrina, or whatever you choose to put on there. I'm sure it'll be great. But this is our finished product. You end up with a large square blanket. It's lots of fun. These edges are great to snuggle up with, and anyone you gift it to will love it. Thank you so much for joining us on Tuesdays with Grace. Have a great rest of your day.